Hello everyone, welcome to version 1.1 of my Resident Evil Code Veronica X no damage walkthrough, and at the start right here we're going to get past these two zombies by breaking out of the grabs. So, if you don't know, in Resident Evil Code Veronica and also in Code Veronica X, whenever the zombies do the lunging grab and they grab onto you, you can actually break out of those grabs without taking damage. So basically, the moment they start to lunge at you with the grab, you can start rotating the analog stick or just rotating your D-pads, and you'll be able to break out of the grab. So that's how I was able to get out of the grabs just then, because I was able to bait out the long-range grabs by quick turning. And at times, you can also run into the zombies and get them to do the long-range grab, but I don't recommend it because it's kinda inconsistent. The best way to ensure that they do the long-range grab is to quick turn at the right moment. Or if you stand behind them, or if you stand to their sides, they will do the long-range grab, and you'll be able to break out of the grabs that way. It only works with the zombies grabs, by the way. It doesn't work with any other enemy type that grabs. Although, actually, no, the mods in the Antarctic base, when you're playing as Claire, if they grab onto you, you can actually shake out of the grab without taking damage or without them placing those larvae on you. And I think it's the same case with the larvae as well. If you rotate the analog stick fast enough before a larvae gets a chance to bite you when it hatches, you'll be able to destroy them before they have a chance to bite you. Of course, it's just better to kill the mods with bullets rather than actually taking the time to let them grab you and then breaking out of it because of the poison powder that they use. And I so need to talk a lot more about the things I like about this game and don't like about this game, because the first half of this game, I think it's really good. Aside from a couple of broken scenarios involving Bandersnatches, the pacing of the first half is really good, and I think the scenarios that they put you in are really fun, and there's a definite sense of flow to actually going through rooms, doing the correct puzzles, picking up the correct objects, and it's just a lot of fun. And I gotta say, guys, compared to Resident Evil 4 Remilk, Code Veronica is so much better. Like, Code Veronica just has something to it that just allows it to have so much more replayability compared to Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And it's only because of how the encounters are handled, and I think it's just because of how satisfying it is just doing certain actions in Code Veronica compared to Resident Evil 4 Remilk. But I'll talk more about this when I get the chance. Right now, after we picked up the MP100 pistols from that building and gotten the Hawk emblem, and then flipped that switch, and then used an explosive to get rid of the zombies, and all this other stuff that you've just seen so far, we're going to pick up the special alloy right over there, and we're going to use the padlock key to get past this door. All of this is heavily edited, by the way. I did not think I was going to be able to edit Code Veronica in such a way that I would get it in under an hour, because of course I can only record up to an hour on Share Factory, but considering that Resident Evil Code Veronica X is a longer game than Resident Evil 1 Remilk, I really didn't think I was going to be able to record this in under an hour, but I proved myself wrong. Now, right there, you'll want to pick up the first aid spray and then trigger the lockdown by trying to go through the metal detector with the first aid spray in hand, so that you can shut the windows, and when you go to pick up the replica Hawk emblem, the zombies will not be able to break through the windows. See, it's stuff like that that I feel is very interesting about this first half. Then the second half just really drags on, and there's not a lot of thought put into how the enemy encounters are handled, not a lot of thought with the environments, because you're just retreading through environments, and they're all very short. And there's nothing interesting really happening with them. And then with the encounters, I mean, the bosses in the second half of Resident Evil Code Veronica X are horrible. There's very rarely going to be a boss that's good. I think Alexia Type 1 is really the only decent boss there is. Every other boss is just terrible. I really feel like the boss quality of Resident Evil Code Veronica can be as bad as the boss quality of Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 1 Remilk, or Resident Evil 4 Remilk. It's just a very sad reality with this game. The bosses should have been so much better. But we've made our way over to the palace now. The palace is very simple. Like, this entire first half, I think I could have easily done the first half of Resident Evil Code Veronica X without saving or using ink ribbons. But I was originally going to re-record this walkthrough after I finished my recording of this entire game, because I thought the quality could have been better. And unfortunately, while I made good progress on the first half of Resident Evil Code Veronica X, I got tagged by a baby albinoid in that lab that you need to escape from, and it really killed a lot of the motivation to continue on from there, so that's why I just decided to do the recording of this walkthrough. But not much in terms of threats so far. So I guess I'll give my thoughts on Code Veronica X. Code Veronica X has some really cool ideas, and this right here is really cool. So if you use the lighter, you can stop the bats from attacking you. So you're completely invulnerable to the bats. They will never think to attack you because they don't like the light. Like I said, a lot of interesting designs like that, and I do feel like there is a sense of intelligence to how you handle certain encounters, or just the order of rooms you encounter when you're going through the areas. I mean, I think there is a definite sense of intelligence, something that you never really get with Resident Evil 1 Remake, and certainly in Resident Evil 4 Remake. I mean, I just don't understand how the quality of a recent Resident Evil game, like Resident Evil 4 Remake, could be so bad that a fixed camera-based Resident Evil game could be so much better. Like, Resident Evil 4 Remake, as I've said a million times, is just a pre-alpha that never should have left the developers' mindscapes, because they just badly refined that entire pre-alpha, and so many of the encounters were just done so poorly in Resident Evil 4 Remake. The mechanical problems, the very poor quality of the character portrayals and the story. It's so bad. That's not to say the story in Resident Evil Code Veronica X is better. The story in Resident Evil Code Veronica is a pretty dumb story, honestly. When you make the main villains a bunch of man-children, when you have someone like Steve that is just so comically silly as a character, you just have to wonder what the developers were thinking. And going back to the villains, when you look at like Alcina Dimitrescu from Resident Evil Village, she is a much better version of this very greedy aristocrat out for power than Alexia Ashford is in this game. I mean, her voice acting is really bad. Her laughs that she does are so cringe. And like I said, she's just a man-child. She literally feels like a 5-year-old inside of an adult body. Like, who wants that as a villain? I mean, if you're talking about someone like Evelyn, for instance, like, I genuinely consider Evelyn from Resident Evil 7 to be one of the most evil villains ever. Maybe even the most evil villain ever. And the way she was done with her acting, with her portrayal, with what she did to Ethan, Mia, and Rose in Resident Evil 7 and Village, it's all done really well with her character. Like, Evelyn, I would honestly say, is just a better villain than most of the villains we ever come across in the Resident Evil series. Like, they had a vision of what they wanted to do with Evelyn, and I think they achieved it nicely. And it's just a shame that a villain like Miranda from Resident Evil Village couldn't really get the same level of build-up as Evelyn. And I pointed this out in my Resident Evil Village review. And I'm currently working on my Shadows of Rose review as well. And while it makes no sense for Evelyn to be cataloged into the Mega Mycete, her acting and just the way she presents herself to Rose, I really like it in the DLC, and I'm going to talk about it in the review. Oh, and by the way, that encounter with the Bandersnatch, you want to go into that encounter with the explosive bolts, not just the regular bowgun bolts, because the start of the Bandersnatch encounter is completely random, because there's a random possibility that he can choose not to cling onto the wall and pull himself, and he'll just attack you immediately, and he's so fast, you have no chance of getting away. And I talked with Carcinogen SDA when he was recording Code Veronica X for his No Damage, No Save attempt, and he mentioned that Bandersnatches are actually faster on Code Veronica X compared to the regular Code Veronica version. So that's probably why you get those moments where they just hit you very fast, but it's really bullshit. That's one of the times where the first half of Resident Evil Code Veronica X can rear its ugly head, even though the first half is done really well. But the Bandersnatches need a lot of improvement, and I do not understand why they play certain Bandersnatches the way they did. And the Bandersnatches seem rigidly designed with the explosive bolts in mind. Like, any other weapon is just not good against them, and it just feels like they designed that enemy so rigidly with the explosive bolts in mind that it gave them some leeway to make them very bullshit with their placements initially in a room. Like, there's one room where you use a silver key, and there's 2 Bandersnatches in the room, and the first Bandersnatch can immediately attack you the moment you load into the room. And if you do not have explosive bolts, you will not be able to stop that Bandersnatch from hitting you. And then there's another encounter where after you go up those stairs that lead up to Alcina's castle area, there is a moment where you shift the camera to another perspective, like you just swap to another fixed camera angle, and it spawns a Bandersnatch right in front of you, and he can immediately hit you, and you have to swap to that camera angle because there are certain situations in Resident Evil Code Veronica X where if you swap to another camera angle, it will spawn enemies. The enemies are not loaded into the map when that camera angle is not triggered, and it's so bullshit. And there are a lot of situations like that with the Bandersnatches, and it's so bullshit. It really is. But this right here, this room I should have gone into before starting the first Bandersnatch encounter, because this is where you can get that key with a tag that allows you to enter another room to then gain access to bowgun powder, which you can then combine with regular bowgun bolts to craft explosive bolts. So that's what I should have done when I first entered this entire building. I should have not gone for the biohazard card door immediately. I should have just gone into this room, grabbed the key with the tag, grabbed the bowgun powder, combined it to make explosive bolts, then done the encounter with the Bandersnatch, and then do the rest of the encounters that you're seeing right now. That is exactly what I should have done, and that was a huge blunder on my part that I was going to rectify in the next walkthrough I would have made had I not been tagged by that baby albinoid. And to talk about enemy types in Resident Evil Code Veronica X, a lot of them are badly designed. I mean, Bandersnatches are single-mindedly designed with the explosive bolts in mind. They have some pretty dumb attacks as well. They can cheap shot you by taking advantage of the camera angles and certain moments where you're loading into a room. And the zombies are okay, they're pretty well designed, although I will say, it is very annoying when a zombie rushes you, and when they're just about to grab you, you shoot them and you trigger that counter animation. And that's something that I mentioned as well. You can counter zombies' grabs by knifing them in the legs, or just knifing them in general during their active frame period, or during their recovery period, and they'll get knocked over and you can finish them off when they're on the ground. But when you're using a weapon like the pistol, for instance, and they get so close to you that they're just about to grab you, you can accidentally counter them with the pistol, and this can sometimes trigger them to fall to the ground and they'll just grab you by the leg and bite you. And that got me screwed a couple of times, especially when it comes to turbo zombies. But I need to pause in this tangent right now because we have this room with the baby albinoids. You need to have grenade rounds for the sequence because there are going to be 2 albinoids that will spawn right in front of you. You need to use one grenade and aim down in order to hit the both of them. And the one that tagged me is, you saw him right there for a second, but he can sometimes be in your way when you're trying to get to the door. So I recommend using a second grenade in order to get him out of the way, just so he's not a random variable to consider. And after that, aside from a couple of dumb encounters with Bandersnatches that requires the use of the explosive bolts, I think the only other encounters that might give the average player a lot of trouble are just the encounters with the Tyrant. But they're very simple to do, and they're pretty well designed, so long as you have the right amount of ammo. And if you are baller, you can do them with just a knife. And with the plain Tyrant encounter, you can use only the cargo, but in the first case, when you're using the knife against the Tyrant, it's actually a really good option, and it can definitely save up on a lot of ammo. And I know a lot of people tend to use the grenade launcher against them, but it's kind of pointless because the knife is already very good against the first Tyrant. When you get to the plane, doing the encounter cargo only is very awkward to do, even with the methods I've discovered. So it's just better to use the BOW gas grenades against him, then use the cargo against him, then just run around the plane, because he's in a weakened state, so he's not going to be able to move around very well. And just use the cargo on him again, and he's no problem. And that pretty much makes up all of the encounters of this first half that I would consider to be the trickiest encounters of the first half. But let me just resume what I was talking about with the turbo zombies. So, on this game, zombies have the ability to seamlessly transition into a state where they move very fast towards you, and this is what a lot of popular YouTubers refer to as turboing. So, turbo zombies are just very fast zombies, and previously they were in Resident Evil 3 OG, but in Resident Evil 3 OG, there is no seamless transition from a walking state into a turbo state. The zombies either chose to enter a walking state or a turbo state, but on this game, zombies can transition from a walking state to a turbo state out of the blue, and it can catch you off guard sometimes, and it's why right here I chose to go down the stairs to deal with the zombie rather than just staying where I was, because out of the blue, he could have gone turbo and just grabbed me, and I don't have the best weapon at the moment for dealing a high amount of DPS to stop him from grabbing me. Oh, in this sequence right here, you need to make sure you have the explosive bolts equipped. Do not use the grenade launcher. If you try to use the grenade launcher, the grenade will just clip against the computer because of the way Claire holds it. Using the bowgun is better because she's able to fire above the computer and she's able to hit the Bandersnatch. This right here is bullshit because you have to trigger this camera angle in order for the Bandersnatch to spawn. Same right here, you have to trigger this camera angle for the Bandersnatch to spawn. That right there, the reason why I ran forward for a bit was because I got kind of mixed up with my controls. I just had a brain fart in that moment, so I nearly got hit. And then right there, I equipped my lighter, and I'm going to be able to get past the bats right over here. And I made a mistake right here. I should not have grabbed that music box plate because I'm of course going to forget to pick up the music box plate when I return to that area later on, and so I have to backtrack back just to pick it up. So I should have just left it in there. That was definitely a mistake on my part. And this right here is another bullshit section because again, you need the bow gun. And you got to fire your bow gun almost immediately. So just hold R1 during the loading door sequence, and then just mash X so that you can hit this guy before he attacks you. And heading back to the prison complex, I'm going to equip the grenade launcher to deal with a zombie that could be close to me. The spawn of these 3 zombies is random each time you enter this room. I don't know why there are certain situations where the initial placement of enemies is different each time you replay them. It's very odd. But you gotta make sure you have the grenade launcher for these upcoming encounters with the zombies, because these zombies just have a higher chance of going turbo when you return to this area, and getting rid of them as fast as possible is crucial to succeed in this area. And because of how superfluous a lot of the grenade launcher rounds are in this game, it's just best to use them against turbo zombies. Like, acid rounds don't have much utility, aside from maybe dealing with hunters, but Carcinogen SDA recommends using the normal grenade rounds against hunters, but in my case, I get a lot of moments where I try to use the grenade rounds or acid rounds on hunters, and they don't get knocked over. Instead, they flinch for a bit, and because they are able to recover from the flinch faster than you actually reload the grenade launcher, you're going to most likely get hit by the hunters, and hunters on this game are one of the worst enemy types. Like, remember in Resident Evil 0 how hunters could just hyper armor through a lot of your shots and the stuns on them were completely broken? Well, this is kind of a similar case with Code Veronica, and they only seem to get flinched if you deal a lot of damage to them in a couple of seconds, and that's why I like using the submachine guns against them. However, if they end up doing the jump attack, the submachine gun will not flinch them unless they die. And you can use the grenade launcher as another way to make them flinch, but I think it's more effective when you're hitting them from a distance with the acid rounds, or if they're close to you, you then use the grenade rounds to knock them over. So, like, they actually read up in your face if you're going to make them flinch and knock them over with the grenade rounds. I don't know, guys. Hunters are just very broken in this game. The stuns on them are completely broken. And when you use the shotgun against them, you can definitely notice instances of broken stuns. But this right here is a really dumb encounter with an enhanced zombie, because this anatomist zombie continually moves fast, and he has a lot more life than usual. So much life that you need to use at least 3 grenade rounds in order to kill him. I don't know what the lore justification is, but that just doesn't make any sense at all. It's one of the stupidest encounters, and it's just a really stupid way to justify using high-powered weaponry against an enemy type that looks no different to a regular zombie. It's so stupid. But this right here, this is all very simple. Just dispatch the zombies at a distance with your pistol or your bowgun bolts. One thing to note about bowgun bolts is that they actually have the ability to curve towards their target. So that's why it's kind of hard to miss with the bowgun bolt so long as the enemy is within your conical view. And right here, we're going to be able to pick up the piano roll and head back to the palace area. Before I do head back to the palace area, I'm going to access a shortcut that leads back to the metal detector area, and I'm going to be able to gain access to the BUW gas grenades as well as some incendiary grenades. And you can also take the time to heal Rodrigo using the hemostatic medicine since you're very close to him. In fact, if you are doing an S-rank run of Resident Evil Code Veronica as well as Resident Evil Code Veronica X, you have to heal Rodrigo and gain access to that lockpick to contribute to the S-rank. And I believe with S-rank, you have to beat the game in less than 4 hours, I believe, and you also have to not use any ink ribbons. You can use that manual save that occurs when you get to the Antarctic base as Claire, and it doesn't actually count as a logged save file. It only counts as a logged save file if you use an ink ribbon, so you can use that to save up on a lot of progress and still contribute to the S rank. And that's how you'll be able to do S rank in Code Veronica. I don't really waste time with that because I feel like doing that is just kind of a waste of time with Resident Evil Code Veronica, and because I care more about no damage and just speed running through a game, that's why I don't waste time with that. And no damaging game just showcases more of the full potential of the game rather than just running through it very quickly and just taking a lot of hits in the process. I mean, if you're doing like no save, no damage, S rank, maybe that's something you can definitely consider as showing the full potential of the game, but I don't really care about that, and I find myself just hating a game a lot when I have to restart large segments of gameplay, and I just feel like in some cases, doing a game no save, no damage, it's kind of disrespectful to the game, I would say, if you're just doing no save, no damage, and just kind of using that as your basic framework for how you judge a game. And I just feel like a lot of people get this wrong a lot of the times. And I think this leads you onto a tangent worth discussing. So a lot of people believe that a game is only well designed if it's actually possible to do no save, no damage in a way that makes sense, but this is not always going to be the case. I mean, what this could also mean is that the game is under-delivering with its mechanics and with its gameplay scenarios, and that everything is just so bare bones and basic that it's going to translate into being well designed for no save, no damage. Like, look at Resident Evil 1 Remake, for instance. I mean, a lot of people say that the game is well designed for no save, no damage, and that it's automatically one of the best games ever made, but the only reason it even comes across as well designed on no save, no damage is because of how underwhelming that game is mechanically, and with its scenarios, and with its enemy designs, and with everything else. Like, that's why that game is serviceable for no damage, no save, only when using all the weapons, though, and using the guns in Resident Evil 1 Remake is such a waste of time, because it's like you're playing on New Game Plus, and the developers don't even want you to use the guns because of the fact that they put in that knife-only trophy for Resident Evil 1 Remake, and compared to Resident Evil Village's developers, Resident Evil 1 Remake is actually justified with putting in that knife-only trophy, but that's not even saying that the game is good because of that. It only goes to show how hollow that game is if its entire base experience and entire design philosophy is based around that restriction. And not only that, but if you're just only looking at a game from no save, no damage, and you're so quick to excuse a lot of games that have very interesting designs and you only don't like them because of very minor gameplay problems or other problems like that, you're not going to appreciate a game fully. Like, look at The Evil Within, for instance. I mean, The Evil Within is a phenomenal game. I would definitely consider that game to be a 9.8 out of 10, and it does have mechanical problems at times, but a person who just embraces the idea of no save, no damage will just consider that game to be so poorly designed, but just completely excuse the amount of complexity, creativity, and intricate thought that was put into so much of The Evil Within's mechanics and design philosophies. That's why the idea of just calling a game well-designed based purely on no save, no damage is just wrong to do, because you make your definition of a well-designed game so strict that you end up excusing a lot of other great games in the process. It's like what an epidemiologist goes through when they're trying to designate what exactly constitutes an infected individual when they're dealing with an outbreak, for instance, because if you make your definition too strict, you are excusing people that may also be infected just because they don't display certain symptoms that you've outlined in your definition. And that's why I don't like to think of games only from the context of no save, no damage. I mean, if they're well designed for no save, no damage, that's cool, but I like to think of it more so as a side effect rather than just the common primary effect displayed by a game that is well designed, because it just leads you to be very limited in your mindset. Also, right here, wait until the Tyrant walks 6 steps, and then on the 7th step, that's when you got a knife so that you can dodge his hit. And then he'll get stunned as long as you're repeatedly knifing him. When he gets stunned, you've got to take a step back, or maybe like 1.5 steps back, to ensure that when you do knife him, he doesn't hit you, because he can still hit you while he's stunned like that. And because your hitbox shifts forward when you are knifing down, that is what can allow him to hit you. So that is something you've got to bear in mind when you are trying to knife him. And then this sequence is very simple. Just hit him with all of your BOW gas grenades, launch the catapult at him, and with the amount of damage you've done to him, he'll be in a weakened state where he will just be very slow, and he will not be able to do his running attacks. Then you just gotta wait for the catapult to ready itself, use it on him, and he's done for. Very simple encounter. Like, the Tyrant fights are definitely the better fights of Code Veronica, and now we're on the second half, and this is really where the game quality diminishes, because there's not much to this Antarctic base. The encounters are pretty dumb, there are some pretty broken enemy types, the bosses are horrendous. It almost feels like a different development team handled this part of the game, and I think one of the main contributing factors to the low-quality elements to the second half of Code Veronica is because this game was originally released on 2 different discs. The first half of the game was on one disc, and the second half was on another disc, and I believe Krasinch and SDA mentioned that the reason why they did this was because of technical issues, because if Code Veronica was a long game on one disc. There might have been technical issues in the later parts, and to mitigate this issue, they released Code Veronica on 2 separate discs. But I think because they divided the work like that, that's definitely why the low quality elements are here with the second half compared to the first half. The first half actually feels like there's a lot of thought put into it. There's definitely some creativity, there's some very interesting encounters, there's proper flow and pacing, and then this second half comes along and I don't see the same quality at all. And also, guys, I'm going to get rid of these spiders right over here, just because I'm fed up with them. This is one of the worst enemy types in the game by far, because they have so much life, their pathfinding is horrendous, their attacks are very douchey, and the hit detection on their body parts is pretty bad, because there's this whole mechanic with these spiders where if you destroy their thorax and it blows up, but they're still alive, they can move a lot faster, and they grab very ferociously, and they can be very bullcrap, and they can just hit you before you've even had a chance to reload your grenade launcher. And I cannot begin to tell you the amount of times it looks like I'm going to kill a spider with a grenade, and I somehow hit the thorax, and he gets it blown off. He's able to move faster, and he just grabs me. It's so dumb. I really do not understand what they were thinking, and this enemy just barely flinches, and I think the best way to deal with this enemy is to wait for it to try to spit at you, and because it's raised its front body, you're not going to be able to hit the thorax as much, and so you then fire grenades at it, and you'll then be able to get rid of it very quickly without running the risk of hitting the thorax. But I also wanted to play around with the knife. I was originally just going to play around with this, and if I took damage, I was just going to restart. There wasn't really much carry here, but because I ended up doing this without taking damage, this ultimately ended up being a part of the walkthrough, which you're seeing right now. So these guys are dead. You're still not out of the woods yet because there is a spider underneath the floor grate, and it can shoot you. You can't shoot it. This is the spider that will actually grow very large because of the P epsilon gas that you release here to gain access to the gas mask. And P epsilon, if you don't know, is a gas that was actually in Resident Evil 2, so it's really interesting that this game ties into Resident Evil 2 with the P epsilon gas. And also, I feel like a total idiot, but I didn't even realize that Code Veronica was the first Resident Evil game to use the term BOW. I thought the term BOW was first introduced in Resident Evil 5. But even though it literally says BOW right to my face, when I look at the barcode sticker, and when I look at the crates, and when I look at the door that literally says BOW, it somehow didn't clue into my head that this game was the first Resident Evil game to use the term BOW. I really don't give the old Resident Evil games enough credit, but it is really cool that an older Resident Evil game could be the first to use such a really cool terminology that honestly feels like some kind of terminology you would use in the real world. Like, I expect scientists in our world to use such terminology. Like, the whole term BOW is such a generalizable term. Like, any media that utilizes any kind of enemy that is created through artificial means like this, I just call them BOWs. I mean, like, weren't the xenomorphs in Alien supposed to be the equivalent to BOWs? Weren't they manufactured based on what Prometheus said? I think that's what it was going for. Like, that's why I would call them BOWs as well. Like, it's just such a fun term to use, and I just hate the fact that we haven't heard the term BOW since Resident Evil Vendetta. Resident Evil Vendetta was the last Resident Evil media to use the term BOW, and we have not heard that term ever since. And they don't even bring the term into Resident Evil 4 Remake for some bizarre reason. Like, I could understand in Resident Evil 2 and 3 not using this terminology because, of course, bioorganic weapons weren't exactly a big thing back then, but as soon as the Raccoon City incident happened, bioterrorism started occurring in other areas because Umbrella's data had leaked onto the black market. And so that's why the term BOW was created, and it's so interesting that they just brought it into Code Veronica, and it's interesting that they don't even, like, speak the term. They just simply, like, listed as a word. Like, you don't hear characters actually using the term BOW, which is interesting. So it's really cool that Code Veronica does this. However, this is not very cool. This room right here is another example of the developers clearly giving in to limited time and budget, and they couldn't think of anything interesting to do, so they just have infinitely respawning moths that are so annoying because while they can be in the same initial positions at times, when they start flying, they really start to highlight just how bad the shooting is when you're only restricted to 3 different stances. You have, like, aiming low, aiming, like, directly forward, and then aiming up, because you're only restricted to those 3 stances, and the only possible way you're going to aim in between the low and middle stands or between the middle and high stands is to tap the D-pad for a bit so that you can then shoot. Like, you have to resort to all these awkward ways of actually shooting these mods, I mean, that's just really dumb. I don't know what they were thinking with that, and I just feel like it's yet again another example of them not really contributing to increasing the quality of the second half of this game, and so they just favored this very rudimentary, basic model that an amateur would favor. And right here, I can't tell where these mods are. I'm trying to use the auto-aim to my advantage, but this guy could have caught me. This guy could have caught me during the time I was just dropping my aim and then re-engaging it. And the sound just doesn't help because the audio is always dishonest with these fixed camera-based games. Oh, and also these zombies right here, you don't have to deal with them right now. What you could have done is back on the second floor, you could have shot them. I saw Carcinogen SDA doing this in his live stream, and I was surprised. I didn't actually know you could shoot these zombies from the second floor directly above me. Oh, and also pick up these shotgun shells. I completely blanked out on the fact that this entire area gets encased in ice because of the flooding that occurs. And of course, because we're in the Antarctic, that water will freeze very quickly. And so I just missed out on free shotgun shells just then. But it's all done. Like, we've just done that entire Antarctic base. Like, it's just so short, and now we have this terribly designed boss fight. So, I know a lot of people might say, why do you not use the sniper rifle? Well, it's because the hit detection between the sniper rifle and Nosferatu's weak spot is horrendous. When it's that bad to the point where you have to resort to the knife, that just goes to show how fundamentally awful this boss is. And I had to restart this guy so many times, and then I eventually quit the game entirely to go back to the main menu and then reload my save. And then on this attempt, I got it on my first try. So stupid. And Carcinogen SDA had no problems using the sniper rifle against this guy. I don't know if the hit detection on his weak spot is different between Code Veronica and Code Veronica X, although I think Carcinogen SDA played Code Veronica X and he didn't have any trouble with the hit detection, but it still doesn't excuse the fact that they just designed a very awkward fight, and the way the fight goes when you're trying to do it knife only, which seems to be the only possible way to do it because the hit detection on the sniper rifle is terrible and turning while aiming the sniper rifle is just very slow, is you'll need to bait out one of his attacks. I bait out the back attack because it seems to be the one attack where I don't have much trouble hitting his weak spot because of very clunky hit detection. And so I get in front of him when he tries to do his back attack, and I then hit his weak spot, he gets stunned, and you have to aim up with the knife. You have to aim up so that you can actually hit his weak spot. And when he gets stunned by the knife, you then have to maneuver to the front of his right leg, while still moving at a specific angle when he turns. So like, from the initial position where you're at when you knife him, you then have to move in a certain direction in relation to him, so that when you position yourself in front of his right leg, you'll actually hit his weak spot. And you just repeat this process, and he'll die very quickly. I mean, I don't understand why it's not just one hit or something, or like 3 hits. Like, why does it have to be that many hits? It doesn't make sense. And when clunky mechanics are a factor to consider, that should warrant a boss that should take fewer hits. I mean, it's just no different to what the Infected Bat was like in Resident Evil 0. The Infected Bat is one of the worst bosses ever made in the entire Resident Evil series, because for some stupid reason, they decided to put in a very versatile enemy into a game that, once again, has the same 3 aiming stance system, and also it has an auto-aim system, and when you have the little bats joining in the fight, and they are throwing off your auto-aim, you're not even hitting the guy, and it's just rigidly designed around incendiary grenades. You just have to damage race the infected bat, and hope you succeed. It's just like what it is with Nosferatu, but Nosferatu's definitely a better encounter than the infected bat. It's definitely not as stupid because at least he doesn't have enemies supporting him compared to the infected bat. But it's still a dumb fight either way. And also right here, make sure you have the submachine guns after you kill the Gulpworm. The Gulpworm is another stupid fight because randomly you can get hit by debris when he emerges from the ground, and the only way you're going to damage the Gulpworm is if he stays above the surface for a bit longer just to roar, because during that period he's at least vulnerable to 5 explosive bolts, and that's enough to take him out. And then from there you can gain access to the submachine guns, and when you get over here you need to use the submachine gun on these 2 hunters because using the grenades was just very random for me, and that was a mistake. I completely blanked out on the fact that there were zombies when you get out of the elevator, so I nearly got grabbed, and I was not even prepared for it if they did grab me. So make sure you equip the incendiary grenades to deal with these guys. Like I said, incendiary grenades have no purpose in this game at all, aside from just getting rid of zombies. They don't really serve a utility against a lot of the higher echelon of BOWs, or even against certain bosses, and this was a mistake. I thought that drone would turn off its cone once it got up to the wall, but I didn't realize it was coming back to me, and so I ended up getting spotted, and now you have to deal with a hunter. So he's gone, but again, I just used the incendiary grenades, and you'll notice that he was getting stunned, he was getting knocked back, But last time I tried to use the incendiary grenades on hunters, didn't even make him flinch. It was just really stupid. I don't know what it is about the hunters on this game. Why are they so broken? And also that right there, you've got to skip that cutscene. If you do not skip that cutscene and you try to aim, Chris will not auto-aim onto the Bandersnatch and you'll miss. So skip the cutscene, aim immediately to stop that Bandersnatch from hitting you, and you're fine. This right here, I used the submachine gun. Crescension SDA does not recommend using the submachine gun, but in my case, it was helping me out, and it was definitely a lot more reliable than the grenade launcher, because the numerous times hunters would not get knocked back by the grenade launcher is too much to say. But if the hunters decide to do the jump attack and you have the submachine gun out, you will not be able to stun them unless you kill them. It's so stupid. How could Resident Evil 1 OG and Resident Evil 3 OG give jump attacks to the hunters, yet you can actually hit them out of the air if they do that? It's so balanced. Like, why do these hunters even need to run at you? They might as well just spam that jump attack as an alternative way to get to you. Let's see how balanced this game is. It's really retarded. There is no excuse for this lacking quality with the hunters when they did so much better with the original games. And also right here, we're coming up on another hunter. This guy just attacks you almost immediately. This is yet again another example of very poor enemy placement. Why does he attack you so quickly after you load in? How do you have time to prepare for that scenario? It's so retarded. But he's dead, and we grab the grenade rounds here. We're gonna grab the Clement over here, and I already grabbed the previous Clement before I grabbed the doorknob. And then from here, we're just going to make our way over to the airport area so that we can get the proofs. And during this time, I'm just going to go on a different tangent, and can I just say I love the soundtrack of Code Veronica? There are definitely some standout soundtracks to Code Veronica. At least Code Veronica has some music compared to Resident Evil 1 Remake. Resident Evil 1 Remake's music is just so soft-spoken, you can't even hear it properly, and a lot of it is just so repetitive, so boring. It doesn't add anything to the environment. Like, what were they thinking with the soundtrack in Resident Evil 1 Remake? The soundtrack in Resident Evil 1 Remake might as well just be noise, and that's it. Whereas in Code Veronica's soundtrack, there are some standout tracks when it comes to the environment and the high-octane action at play. Like, the soundtrack at least has character compared to Resident Evil 1 Remake. I genuinely do not understand why people laud the soundtrack of Resident Evil 1 Remake. It really doesn't make any sense to me at all. The soundtrack just has no character compared to Resident Evil Code Veronica's soundtrack or any of the other Resident Evil games. And the soundtrack was one of the main reasons why I chose to do Resident Evil 1 Remake without audio when I was doing my knife-only no-damage walkthrough, and because of that, I only ever played Resident Evil 1 Remake without audio, because the audio is so unnecessary to play Resident Evil 1 Remake. Like, that game is so underwhelming and so simple. You don't even need audio to play it. But you'll notice that I dealt with those two sweepers, which are the poison hunters. Crescension SDA mentioned that in that encounter with the two sweepers, there is a consistent line that you can take where they will not be able to hit you and you'll not have to worry about them hyper-armoring through your attacks. Like, what I did was very risky dealing with those hunters with the acid rounds, because at any moment one of them could have rushed me, another one could have possibly done the jump attack on me. It's just a circus of random variables trying to deal with those two sweepers the way I did it. But Crescension SDA mentioned that if you run towards the first sweeper and circle him in a counterclockwise manner, you'll be able to bypass his swipe, and then you can just run past the other one, and you won't have to run the risk of him doing the jump attack, and you can get to the door. I don't know if this method is consistent or not. He says it's consistent, but I'll have to see if it truly is consistent when I replay that section a bit, just to see if it works. But we've done the rest of the encounters. Now we're in the Antarctic base. Be careful of these tentacles. You have to hit them at least 3 times with the shotgun to make them go away. And I'm going to go into this room because I missed out on some supplies when I was playing as Clara because of the overwhelming number of enemies I was dealing with. And after this, we'll be able to progress further. And also, you don't need the pistol anymore. In fact, you don't even need the pistol for Rockford Island when you're playing as Chris. The pistol is entirely useless. And you also don't need the grenade launcher at all. You only need the shotgun for the rest of this. And then at some point, you get the Magnum. So using the Magnum to deal with the zombies and the hunters, you'll be able to get past them. And then when you get the Magnum, you can use it against the giant spider, you can use it against Alexia Type 1, and then when it's time to fight Alexia Type 2, you need the explosive bolts and the shotgun. So yeah, you don't really need a lot of weapons for these scenarios as Chris, but I don't mind that whatsoever. It just allows me to not have to juggle around so much in my inventory. But this sequence right here is pretty dumb. Crescension SDA immediately uses his shotgun to take care of the zombies, but I'm pretty sure that I've had times where when I've tried to do this, one of the zombies has just fired their parasite at me, because the zombies that have those sores all over their bodies, those are larvae from moths inside of them, and they have the ability to fire these parasites, and when these parasites latch onto you, even though they aren't even stabbing you, it actually does damage to you, as Crescension SDA explains. And you have to shake them off of you. If you don't shake them off, they'll just repeatedly stab you at specific points. And it's just really dumb. And I'm not really sure what the best way to do it is. Maybe it's best to do what Crescension SDA says and just immediately fire your shotgun at the zombies. But I'm positive I've had situations where they've been able to fire the parasite at me even when I've used the shotgun. But Crescension SDA tells me that it's consistent, so I'll have to replay that section a bit just to see if he's right. And then we have a couple more zombies, we can easily dispatch them. There's not a lot of enemies in this Antarctic base, and that's definitely complementary to the fact that the first half was done, now we're on the second half, which started from the Antarctic base facility as Claire, so in order to ensure that it's the halfway point, the culmination of the second half has to be short, which is why the Antarctic base as Chris is very short. There's not a lot of substance here, there's not a lot of interesting scenarios, and the boss fights that occur in the second half are definitely quite bad. Yeah, it's definitely an underwhelming area. I mean, I really wish they had a better vision in mind when constructing Code Veronica. I feel like this game could have been so much better. Not so much better as in it's bad the way it is, because the first half is really good. Like, if they focused entirely on the first half and just changed up certain scenarios so that the ending would play out differently and the story would be played out a bit differently, I think Code Veronica could have been a significantly better game. But at the moment, I would honestly say that Code Veronica is a 50-50 game for me. I'm not going to say a 5 out of 10, though, because I do think there are some elements in the second half that are kind of interesting. So I would probably give this game maybe like a 6 out of 10. That's what I would say. Also, by the way, if you kept the empty extinguisher from the first half, you'll be able to use it here, because the reason why the game gives you the empty extinguisher is to get access to the Magnum, because the Magnum is right behind this fire right here, and you'll be able to gain access to it once you refill the extinguisher. So there's the Magnum. The Magnum is going to really help out for killing this one sweeper right over here, killing the giant spider, and dealing with Alexia Type 1, and that's the last time we'll use the Magnum. You know, it's very interesting how they give you the shotgun, they give you the Magnum for this last part of Code Veronica, and you use them for such a short amount of time. It's so unlike Resident Evil to handle itself like that, and to give a shotgun this late into the game, like the shotgun is like a base weapon. It's like a default weapon that you give to the players in like the early point of Resident Evil. Why would they give the shotgun at a later point, like near the end of the game? That's so confusing. Same with the Magnum as well. That's really odd to me. But coming up is where stupidity really kicks in, because we're about to deal with these tentacles, so this one can be easily run past. This one here is very random. So at times you can do what I do and not take any damage, but other times you can just take damage out of the blue. It really doesn't make any sense how this tentacle is able to hit Claire when you trigger it to spawn. It's so dumb, and it's so random. But take care of that guy, and then we're going to be dealing with Steve. Steve is such a dumb encounter, but Carcinogen SDA mentioned that the strategy is consistent, and I know the strategy he's talking about. I demonstrated in this walkthrough, but I guess in the previous attempts with Steve, I wasn't really moving correctly. Because when you circle Steve, I think you're meant to be on the left-hand side or like in the middle in relation to the camera. So like, watch this. So stand still, wait for Steve to do the attack, and then run around him. Keep running, just run into the chair, run this way. Steve's gonna clip on the right side. I shouldn't be on the right side right now. I should be more so to like the left or the middle, so that Steve doesn't straighten himself out too quickly and catch up to me. And by doing that, I'm able to get past Steve, and we transition over to Alexia's boss fight. So just Magnum dump her, and she's done. Very simple, and that's a great example of the Magnum being used properly compared to Resident Evil 4 Remake. Because unfortunately, with Krauser in Resident Evil 4 Remake, he was so badly designed, and just fighting him normally just wasn't practical in the slightest, that the game forced you to Magnum dump him like crazy. You had to spec into so many upgrades just to kill him very quickly. Just the amount of life he had no justification. Not to mention the parry was just so unresponsive with him. His hitboxes were horrendous. The number of times I would crouch properly and he would still grab me with that stupid arm of his. And the ambiguity on his hits. The times when the camera would mess with you, the times where you had to just repeatedly loop him by just getting him on the top level, jumping down, and then hitting him when he jumps up to you when you climb those ladders. You had to use the iframes of the ladders to bypass his stupid attacks. Oh my god. Well, I cannot believe they would ruin such an iconic boss from the original version of Resident Evil 4. At least I gotta give every other Resident Evil game credit. They don't create disgraceful fights. Resident Evil 4 Remake has just redefined what it means to be an incompetent development team, and for them to disgrace Krauser the way they did, and just make Magnum dumping the sole way to deal with them, is just seriously fucking retarded on a whole other level. But now we have the final boss fight against Alexia. This is a terrible fight. This is one of the worst final bosses ever made in the entire Resident Evil series. Crescension SCA says he doesn't really have so much problem with her, aside from the random moment where she chooses to spit at you, but you have to use a combination of the explosive bolts and the shotgun. So the explosive bolts are for Alexia, and the shotgun is for dispatching the babies that spawn. So you got to make sure you position yourself correctly so that you're not having to turn to the left or right so much when using the shotgun, and just keep firing everything that you have at her. Crescension SDA mentioned that it takes at minimum 12 explosive bolts to deal with her, but I still recommend having way more than that just in case the game decides to screw you. But after about 5 shots from the explosive bolts, you'll want to swap to the shotgun and check for the little guys. But that right there was cutting it very close because that little guy chose to spawn from the closest spawn point that was right near me, and I nearly got caught just then. These little guys can choose to jump at you and just damage you, or they can pull out their tentacles and damage you. If they pull it out at a distance, it will not hit you, although they can have phantom range at times, but if they do that, you're in luck, because then you can get some time to swap to the shotgun and deal with them, or just pump in some additional shots into Alexia. But it's just an absolute mess. What were they thinking with this? This is asking for poor designs to be a factor to consider. Like, they were so brain dead when designing this encounter. This is almost as bad as certain bosses in Resident Evil 0, like the Infected Bat or the final boss. This is seriously one of the most retarded boss fights ever, and I can't believe I originally said that Moreau from Resident Evil Village was worse than this. Alexia 2 in Code Veronica is infinitely worse than Moreau. What was I thinking back then? But we'll be able to take her out with the linear launcher. She always fires 4 times, and then you just gotta take the time to shoot her before she gets the chance to initiate her barrage. After about 1 or 2 shots from the linear launcher, you'll want to just immediately let go and start running around to avoid the projectiles. If you can hit her with a lucky shot, it's done. And with all that said, that is the end of version 1.1 of my Resident Evil Code Veronica X No Damage walkthrough, which is a significant improvement over my original walkthrough. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.